Hi, everyone. We are just going to wait for a few more people, but you should be at the right place if you're here for the Understanding Kindergarten IEP webinar. My name is Diana Imbert. I'm a staff attorney here at Advocates for Children of New York. I will let Betty Baez-Mello introduce herself as well while we wait to get started.
Hey everyone, good morning. As Diana said, my name is Betty Baez-Mello. I'm the director of our Early Childhood Education Project. Thanks for being here on time. We're expecting many more people, so we're going to give them a few minutes. But while we do that, I'm also going to start a poll so that we can start getting to know you a little bit better, know who's in the audience, so that we can also tailor this presentation to meet your needs. So I'll be launching that in a moment.
All right. We want to know who you are, where are you coming in from, what borough? And I already see some people responding to the question, so that's great. Okay, and again, people are just trickling in, so we're just going to give people a few more minutes before we get started. In the meantime, if you just joined us, there's a poll that we would love to have you answer so that we can have more information and make sure that this presentation is tailored to the people in the room or in the space.
We'll repeat this later on in the presentation, but so you all know, we will be sharing slides of the presentation with you after the fact. We are recording this webinar. We'll send you a link to that recording. We'll also be sending you links to a lot of our kindergarten materials, including our transition to kindergarten guide and the guide for applying to kindergarten as well. Throughout the webinar, if you have questions, you should put them in the Q&A. We'll be pausing momentarily throughout the presentation to answer those questions. Diana and I will also be responding through the chat or through the Q&A itself.
Right, probably just going to give a few more minutes.
We'll aim to start by 10:05. So for those of you who are here and just need another moment, you have a little bit of a break, and hopefully we'll have more parents joining us.
All right, so just another minute and we'll get started. And again, I'm just going to introduce myself quickly because we are going to get started soon. My name is Diana Imbert. I am a staff attorney here in the Early Childhood Education Project at Advocates for Children of New York, and I'll be accompanied by Betty. I'll let Betty again introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Betty Baez-Mello. I'm the director of our Early Childhood Education Project. Thank you for joining us. We know it's early. It's a Tuesday after a holiday. Hopefully you will get a lot of information out of this webinar. We're going to cover so much material, but do not worry. We will be sending you copies of the slides we're presenting, a recording of today's presentation, and links to our guides, fact sheets, and all the materials you need, both to apply to kindergarten and to prepare for your child's kindergarten IEP meeting.
If you weren't here when Betty stated it, just want to restate that we will be taking pauses to answer questions. But in the meantime, you should put your questions in the Q&A because either Betty or I will be responding to those questions, and then also bringing questions that will be important to the larger group to the Q&A at certain points during this presentation. With that being said, it is time for us to get started. Thank you for those who answered the poll. Seems like we're here and well represented, mainly by 3 boroughs and with mainly parents, which is great and good to hear. Today, we will specifically be focusing on understanding the kindergarten IEP. You will learn later that we do have another webinar that will focus more on the kindergarten admissions process, but this webinar will be focused specifically on understanding the kindergarten IEP. So we should get started. So as I stated, all children that are born in 2019 have the right to a public school kindergarten seat in September of 2024. And there are actually 2 processes for families of children with disabilities. There's a kindergarten IEP process, which specifically works with getting students, which is specifically for families of preschool students with disabilities. And these children, this specific process works to determine the special education services that your child will get during their kindergarten school year. Today's workshop is focused specifically on that process. There is also a separate process titled the kindergarten admissions process, which is for all families, including the students of families without, of students with disabilities and students without disabilities. Obviously, public school in New York City serves students of across a range. And so we generally ask and encourage families to apply to both processes. There is a separate webinar that we do that focuses on the kindergarten admissions process. As I've stated, we will focus specifically on the kindergarten IEP process because it is quite a lot to cover both in one. But it's important to know that both these processes exist and that we encourage all families to apply to both processes. And because, again, public schools serve so many students with and without disabilities, most children will actually attend the school that makes them an offer through the kindergarten admissions process. And that process happens through application in my schools. And again, we have a separate webinar to talk about that. But let's focus and talk more about what we plan to do today. So today's training, just going to give you a quick overview. We will go more in depth into every single one of these throughout our time together today. So we already introduced ourselves, but just again, if there's anyone else who has joined us, my name is Diana Imbert. I am a staff attorney here at Advocates for Children in the Early Childhood Education Project. I'm joined by my colleague who will be presenting in a little bit, Betty Baez-Mello, who's a supervising director here as well in the same project. From introductions, which we've done, we're going to focus and move on to our legal rights, talk a little bit about preparing for the IEP meeting, then go into talking through and understanding the IEP, which if you don't know what an IEP is, it's an individualized education program. Talk a little bit about the program and services that can be found on the IEP, talk through various communication, and then applying to kindergarten, and then lastly, with resources that can be left here. We obviously know that this is a lot of information, so we don't want you to worry. As Betty stated at the beginning of this presentation, we will be sending not only this presentation, but also helpful guides and other information that you could use throughout this process. And we will have periods of time. Again, you can utilize the Q&A to ask questions as things come up. And we will also make time to answer questions throughout the presentation as well. Okay. So before we get started, I also want to talk a little bit about what is Advocates for Children. Advocates for Children is an independent agency that protects the rights of all New York City students. We were actually founded in 1971, so we're a little bit above the 50-year mark here. And we were founded by parents of students with disabilities who were really trying to focus on that particular group. But over the years, our mission has actually expanded, and our mission now is really focused on ensuring high quality education for New Yorkers who face barriers to academic success, and specifically with the focus on students from low-income backgrounds. But again, we are covering a much broader range. Some of the services that we offer is that we have a helpline. The number is here. And again, we really encourage families to call at any time. We're available Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We offer free legal services to qualifying families. As we stated, we do guides and we have guides and resources that can be found on our website. There's a specific section that actually focuses on in the early childhood education project that focuses on this process and the kindergarten admissions process, along with preschool and early intervention as well. And we also do workshops and trainings, kind of like the one that we're doing right now. And lastly, we do policy advocacy and impact litigation to make sure that we're having a bigger impact than just individual families, although that's obviously very important as well. Okay. So we're going to get into the law that covers a lot of what we're talking about today. And so the Law for Students with Disabilities is known as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's a national law that protects the educational rights of students with disabilities. And we're going to, in the next slide, talk a little bit more about what it specifically says. So the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is the acronym that we use as IDEA. It is says that all children through age 21 with a disability have the right to a free, appropriate public education, which I may refer to as FAPE throughout this presentation, in the least restrictive environment, or LRE. So just like the peers who can attend public schools, children with disabilities also have the right to a free education that is appropriate to meet their unique and specific needs. And it's important to note that an appropriate education, unfortunately, isn't necessarily the best education. It is exactly as it says, sort of just an appropriate education, which means what is necessary to ensure that a child makes meaningful progress. With that being said, that education has to be provided, that appropriate education has to be provided in the least restrictive environment. So to what extent is possible, we want children who do not have IEPs to be learning alongside students who do have IEPs. But obviously a least restrictive environment is very student dependent. So it really depends on what a student specifically needs. Some students can be in a classroom, a general education classroom, and only be getting specific supports like speech therapy or physical therapy, while other students may need a small environment of 6 students in order to make that meaningful progress. But the goal is to ensure that the child is in the environment that allows them to make meaningful progress. Okay, we're already here and ready to ask some questions. So we're going to launch a poll and see what we've gotten so far. So the question is, an appropriate education means one that allows a student to A, reach their full potential, B, make meaningful progress, C, make any progress, or D, attend their local school. Wow, and I am seeing some incredible answers. Good job. Everyone is listening so well. Okay, perfect. So yes, the majority of us, almost 100% here, did get it correct, which the answer is indeed to make meaningful progress. And again, we don't emphasize this, and it's important for us to say this because we agree necessarily that your child shouldn't be getting the best education. We obviously want your child to be getting the best education, but it's important for us to make sure that you understand what your rights are under the law. And under the law, the right is for your child to make meaningful progress, not necessarily ensuring the best. And also important for when you go to IEP meeting, for you to know the language that will be used throughout this process, which is why, again, we want to emphasize and make sure that you understand this. Okay, so we've been throwing around the word IEP a lot. And so it's important to know, again, as I stated, IEP stands for Individualized Education Program. If your child is eligible for services, this is what the Department of Education will create. It's very similar to your child's IEP if they had one during preschool. And it's based on your student's needs, meaning that it is an individualized program specific to what your child needs in order to meet the IDEA law that we just talked about it is legally binding. So whatever services the IEP says your child is getting, your child is legally required to receive. And it really does work like a contract. If the Department of Education says your child needs this, then your child should be receiving it. The IEP and the services the child will get will be created at a meeting that you will attend. We'll talk a little bit more about that meeting and that IEP specifically in just a little bit, but just high overview, want you to understand sort of what the IEP is. Also important to note that the IEP is good for 1 year. So usually we'll give you a start date and a kind of an end date, and it'll always be within a year. The child should be reevaluated, excuse me, the IEP should be redone once a year. But also important to note, sorry, just before we move on, that you also have the right as a parent to request an IEP meeting at any time. So although it is done every year, you do have a right to call for an IEP meeting at any time. With that being said, I want to talk a little bit more about what it looks like to prepare for this IEP meeting. Because as we've stated, it's a really important thing. And we want to make sure that you are prepared to go into the IEP meeting ready to ensure that your child's IEP really can ensure that they make that meaningful progress. So if your child is already receiving preschool special education services, they may in the same year already have another preschool IEP meeting, depending on when the last year's preschool IEP happened. But just note that they will also separately have another IEP meeting, which will be for their kindergarten school year. So I just don't want parents to get confused. If you're having 2 IEP meetings, one of them will be for their preschool IEP, but the one that we're talking about today is for their kindergarten IEP. And so it's important to note sort of the individuals that will be at the IEP. And I do believe that Betty is reminding us, and I should remind us as well, that please, I know that there's a lot of information. And so throughout this presentation, please feel free to utilize the Q&A to ask any questions that are coming up as you're learning more information or as something might be said that is confusing. And we will also stop periodically to see if there's any questions that we can address in the larger group. With that being said, when you're preparing for the IEP meeting, it's sort of important to note what the DRE's role is, what the preschool role is, and what's your role throughout this process. So in the Department of Education, is important for them to send you certain communications. They should be looking to do evaluations. So evaluations are done every 3 years. It is possible that your child may be reevaluated for kindergarten. You have a right to ask for evaluations or new evaluations at any point. That will be part of the work the Department of Education does in preparing for the IEP meeting. And it's also important for them to schedule meetings, whether that's evaluations or also schedule the IEP meeting. It is, again, their responsibility to schedule this IEP meeting. The preschool, as they're preparing for the IEP meeting, will be preparing progress reports based on the child's what they've done throughout their preschool year, specifically their last preschool year, and really preparing reports to let the Department of Education know sort of what's happened throughout that year, what kind of advancements the child has made, and anything that could really assist and help in trying to determine what will be best for the students following school year. And of course, the preschool will also assist families throughout this process. You have a right to get all of this information, all of the progress reports, all of the evaluations, at least 5 days before the IEP meeting so that you have a chance to review them and to make sure that you understand what comes next and make sure that you also are thinking about what is best for the following school year for your child. And as I said, you should be understanding the options that you have within the IEP process, like what kind of therapies does the child need, what kind of supports and services, where is the child currently, where do we expect them to go. You should be gathering records that could be helpful. For example, if you think that your pediatrician has mentioned, listen, I think that your child needs this specific therapy in order to make progress, then we should get a letter from the doctor's that says that. So that could be helpful to the IEP team. And of course, most importantly, your role will always be to advocate for your child and what is best for your child. And what we really recommend is that you, as you're preparing for this IEP meeting, that you make a list of everything that you could possibly want at that IEP meeting. So if you notice that, for example, that your child has not been receiving as much speech therapy or has not made the progress that you had imagined or wanted your child to make, it's important to advocate and list that and know that you want that and move forward and requesting that. Another thing that we highly recommend before the IEP meeting as well is to just learn about this process. Obviously, you've already taken a really important first step by being here, but also in learning this process, we recommend going to my schools and looking up the various schools that exist, what kind of programs and class recommendations they have. All of this will make a little bit more sense as we actually talk through the various options that exist on the IEP. So I think I won't burden you too much more, but important to note sort of the various roles of the people as you prepare for the IEP meeting and what really they can contribute to the process. And I know I just gave us a lot, so I'll just quickly see if there are any questions. I don't see any. But again, we'll use this as a reminder to everyone to please put your questions in the chat. As you can see, Betty or I will be answering the questions throughout this presentation, but there will be other periods of times where we do stop for this. And Betty's getting on.
Yeah, I just to say, please put your questions in the Q&A because that's where I will be answering them as we go along with the presentation. We do have a question now, how to request evaluations for turning 5. So as Diana just explained in the previous slide, one of the responsibilities of the Department of Education is to send you communications, including to send you information about the DOE representative who will be assigned to your child's case. So you all should have received a welcome packet this fall on yellow paper with a lot of informational materials. Starting in January, you will start to receive what's called a notice of referral, and this will include the information about the DOE representative who will be overseeing your child's evaluations and IEP meeting. If there's any specific assessment that you would like done for your child or you feel your child's needs, you should request it from that representative who will be assigned to your child's case. So it's too early yet and cases have not been assigned. So you have not missed out on anything, but look for that kind of mailing in January and contact that person to request any specific evaluations. And don't see, oh, okay. If you haven't received a yellow packet, who do you follow up with? You should have all received the packet. If you are families of preschool students with disabilities, so children who already have preschool IEPs, you should have already received this packet. If you have not, you should contact your CPSC administrator and or your child's preschool to make sure that the DOE has the right address for you on file. We have a slide on this near the end of the presentation, so I won't go into it much more detail right now, but those are the 2 primary contacts I would recommend you reach out to at the moment. And with that, I will send it back to Diana to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Betty. Appreciate it. And again, thank you for those questions. Again, I think that's probably very helpful to a lot of families. So please keep them coming. We really do welcome them. Okay, so we talked about preparing for the IEP meeting, and now I want to talk about who is at the IEP meeting. So first and foremost, you. It's really important that the parent is there. And again, you have a right to also have 5-day notice of when this IEP meeting will be happening so that you can make arrangements to attend the IEP meeting as you're a critical member of the IEP team. And really, cannot emphasize this enough, really make sure that you are there. The other person who would be there is the district representative, and this oftentimes will be the special education teacher, but it can also be a psychologist. There will be a general education teacher if the student is or may be in a general education classroom and just receiving special education support services. The school psychologist will also be there, who will be or anyone really who can, the Department of Education, who can explain evaluations or change in setting. The district representative should be there as well, a person who knows the district services that can be offered. And then really any other persons that the parent deems important to be there. Some examples, for example, is the doctor, the child's pediatrician, an interpreter if the parent's preferred language is a language other than English, or, you know, an advocate if you have someone that you're working with, they can attend the meeting, or family members or other people who might be able to speak to the child's strengths and weaknesses. So really anyone who you wish to invite who has knowledge of the child. And just also important to note, we see this little phone symbol. It's because IEP meetings can take place by video or phone. You still have a right to notice, and everyone that is required, you know, if it's on by the phone or video, should still attend. But just know that they can happen in person or they can happen via telephone. Okay, I have another poll to ask you guys. So who is not a required member of the IEP team? A, the parent, B, the child special education teacher, C, the child's pediatrician, or D, the DOE district representative? All right. And yes, again, great job, guys. Yes, indeed. The only person who is not required actually of this list is the child's pediatrician. So the parent, the child special education teacher, and the DOE district representative are all required participants of the IEP meeting. But the child's pediatrician isn't. You have the right, again, as I mentioned, to submit, you know, an evaluation that the pediatrician may have done, or a letter that they may have provided you, but they don't have to be there. You can, of course, invite them to attend. You can also request the Department of Education actually have a doctor to attend the meeting. But if you do that, then you should let them know in advance. But again, either way, none of these individuals are required to be at the meeting. So good job. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about the classification of disabilities that will be found on the IEP. So there's a key difference between preschool special education and then school age special education. And that big difference is that a child actually gets a specific classification on their IEP for the first time. And there are 13 possible classifications of disability under the law. Prior to this, if you have a child who already has an IEP, that child on their IEP would have been labeled as a preschooler with a disability. So every single preschooler who has an IEP has the exact same classification on their IEP. Once we transition to kindergarten, we move from that specific classification to one of the 13 classifications that can be found of disability that are under law. And these are actually the ones that we see here listed. So autism, deafness, deafblindness, emotional disability, hearing impairment, learning disability, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment are all classification. One of the 13 options that a child can be classified under law. It's important to note that a child may have more than one of these, but they will be only receive one classification. The classification is not necessarily a diagnosis. It is just simply the classification that the Department of Education will use by which to think through the services that a child will receive. And really important to note as well that this is an eligibility determination. It is one of these classifications that ultimately classify the child for their kindergarten IEP. And also, just because we hear this a lot from a lot of parents, but if a child has been diagnosed with ADHD, most likely they will receive other health impairment as the classification that they will get in their IEP. Okay. So then want to talk through some important sections in an IEP that you should be on the lookout. So again, at the IEP meeting, the team will consider the results of any evaluations that were done, including any independent evaluations, because you do have a right to ask the Department of Education for independent evaluations. And again, as I stated, you should receive copies of these evaluations before the meeting, and you should act that person that you should be requesting that evaluations from would be the Department of Education representation. representative, excuse me. You also have a right to the progress reports that the preschool might have given that will be considered as part of this in preparation for this meeting. And so the reason you should be considering and getting these is because you want to make sure that you've seen these reports in order to prepare again for this exact section that we'll talk about. So what you want to be considering is the child's strengths and needs, right? Because that's what the present levels of performance are. How is a child currently doing? What are their current needs? What are their current strengths? What are their current weaknesses? What have we seen from the child over the course of the last year? And then you're going to decide what the annual goals of the child are. We always want to make sure when we're at these IEP meetings that we're advocating for goals that are specific to the child, and that they're not like overbroad. You don't want to say something like, you know, we want to make sure if my child's name is Jonathan, that Jonathan will read next year. That is too broad of a goal. It's not specific and it's not measurable. And so therefore the IEP will be difficult to be tailored to such a general goal. We want something like, you know, John will read what a pair, you know, 5 words by the end of the year, something more specific that we know we can say, yes, that was accomplished in 1 year or can be accomplished in 1 year. Also important to note that they will have the recommended program. We will talk through a little bit about what options exist for recommended programs. The IEP will also have the related services and support, so physical therapy, speech therapy. It'll also give the frequency and whether or not it'll be individualized, how often it'll happen, and also how long and the duration of the actual therapy, the child will receive if they're receiving that as one of the related services. And then lastly, any of the parent concerns. So ultimately, let's say that you're not agreeing with something specifically, you're going to say, okay, fine, I'll move forward with it, but I don't agree with it. It's important for you to state that and make sure that it is listed in the parent concerns, just in case in the future there might be any issues that you would like to use. And it's easy to point. So if you're going to mediation, we'll talk a little bit about other ways that you can address concerns you might have. But if the parent concerns are listed there, it's good to note that so that you can use it in the future if anything else comes up. Okay. And then we will talk through sort of the continuum of services. I know, as I stated earlier in the beginning, that this IEP falls under the IDEA, meaning that we are looking to ensure the child is getting a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. So we're going to talk through these services from the least restrictive environment to the most restrictive environment. So the least restrictive environment that your child can get is a general education with supports and services. So the first thing is that the general education with supports and services would be in a non-specialized school, which would be District 1 through 32, or what we call neighborhood or community schools. This program will exist in all of those schools. And so usually a general education classroom has more than 25 students with one general education teacher. In this setting, a child can get supports and services that look like a special education, a teacher that comes in that assists with certain things. It can look like the child being in a general education classroom and then receiving speech therapy or physical therapy or additional supports that they may need. From there, we get into a little bit more of a restrictive environment, which is an integrated co-teaching classroom, which includes students that have IEPs and students that do not have IEPs. And these students are basically taught side by side, and they're taught together by both a special education teacher and a general education teacher. Again, this is also a regular size classroom, so it has about 25 students. And then we get into more what we call special class in non-specialized schools or self-contained school programs. So we're going to start first with talking about a 12 to 1-to-1. These special classes are really classrooms that students are in that have about 12 students with one teacher, one special education teacher, and one support staff. And these is sort of the largest of the special classes that we will talk about. These classes can be found in a non-specialized schools, which is again the community schools that we'll talk about, or can be found in a specialized district, District 75. So it can be either of the two, and it'll be stated on the IEP which one of the two it is.
And sorry, just to clarify here, all the programs listed on this slide are available in the non-specialized schools. So in theory, all DOE Districts 1 through 32 non-specialized schools, which are the schools that you can apply to through the kindergarten admissions process, will have all of these programs available. Separately, now we will talk about specialized schools and other programs.
Thank you, Betty. So yes, Betty is correct. Important to note. I did jump the gun a little bit there. Sort of next is now we are talking about programs that are actually not available in the non-specialized District 1 through 32 schools that Betty just referred to, that you can apply through to the kindergarten admissions process. So District 75 is actually a separate school district that is intended for students who have more specific needs that require more intensive support. And so there are specific classes that exist in District 75. There's 12-to-1s, 8-to-1s, 6-to-1s, and 12-to-1-to-4. It's important to note that the ratios refer to how many students, teachers, and then aides in the classroom. So when you see a 12, that means there are 12 students in the classroom. There's one special education teacher, and then one additional support that can be a paraprofessional of some sort. And again, you can sort of see the different ranges that exist. A 12-to-1-to-1 is for students that are with academic and or behavioral management needs who require additional adult support and specialized instruction than what is available in a neighborhood school. The smaller classroom, again, it gets even more specific for students who have even more needs, right, and need to be with less students in a classroom. Similarly, the 6-1 is probably the one for students with the most significant needs. That includes academic, social, or interpersonal development. And lastly, the 12-to-1-to-4 that we see there is for students with severe and multiple disabilities and limited language skills, academic and independent functioning. As you can see, that specific classroom has a lot of adult support. And then from there, there is the option for state-approved non-public schools, which are private special education schools approved by the state for students with educational needs that cannot be met in a public school program. So the IEP program recommendation will say non-public school. It'll also say District 75, or it'll say that it'll be in a non-specialized school. So again, the actual program itself will be listed there. There's also residential placement, which is for students who require services on a 24-hour basis. We see this a little bit less for kindergarten, but important still to note that that is an option that exists on the continuum of services. And then lastly, home instruction, which is available to students with severe physical, mental, or emotional conditions that make attending school relatively impossible. As I mentioned, if we're in this category of the special class in a specialized schools or a non-public school is recommended, the DOE will identify that specific school with a type of class that is recommended on the child's IEP. So these are not necessarily schools that can be applied through the kindergarten admissions process. So that distinction is important. The previous slide did cover schools that can be covered and found and applied to and gotten through the kindergarten admissions process, but these schools are actually schools that the DOE will identify for you. Okay, and I'm going to bring, okay. So if a child's preschool IEP recommends a special class, then the Department of Education must recommend a District 75 kindergarten placement. A, is that true, or B, is that false? Okay, and I'm seeing that again, the majority of you guys got it correct. There are no automatic recommendations. A child who attended a preschool special class may be recommended for a variety of different programs for kindergarten. including placement in a non-specialized schools, District 75, or the non-private school placement that we talked about. And with that being said, I'm going to bring on Betty so that she can continue.
Thanks, Diana. And so now we're still talking about different program options, and we're going to talk specifically about specialized programs. These are programs that are available in some, but not all DOE schools. Most of them are available in some of the non-specialized schools. Again, those are schools that you apply to through the kindergarten application process, also called neighborhood schools, zone schools commonly. One of the programs is available specifically in some, but not all of District 75 schools. So we'll start with bilingual ICT or special class. These are the same overall formats as the ones that Diana went over in terms of ICT. It's an integrated co-teaching class for students with and without disabilities that learn alongside each other, or a special class in a non-specialized school, which is generally the class of 12 students with an IEP, one special education teacher, and a teaching assistant. The difference here is that these are bilingual programs for children who speak a language other than English, so that they can receive their special education services in their target language as well. For the most part, there are programs available most commonly in Chinese and Spanish, but there are programs also in other languages, and we will have the link later on to where you can find more information about these programs. If your child would benefit from a bilingual ICT or special class, that's something that should be discussed at the IEP meeting. You do not have to apply to these programs separately. And if your IEP recommends a bilingual special class or ICT, then the DOE is responsible for finding the school that has that program for your child. You don't apply to those schools directly either. There are the ASD NEST and Horizon programs. These are very popular programs for children who have autism. The ASD NEST is a special kind of integrated co-teaching class where all the children with disabilities in that class are children who have a diagnosis of autism and the classification of autism. Similarly, the Horizon program is a special kind of special class in a non-specialized school where all the children have autism. These programs, NEST in particular, typically serves children who are pretty high functioning, so they're at or above grade level, and they don't really experience behavioral challenges. The Horizon program is for children with autism who are about at or maybe below grade level, who need just a little bit more academic support, may need behavioral supports. Within the Horizon program, they do receive instruction based on ABA, so applied behavior analysis methodology. They are very popular for families. There is an application to apply. We have the link later in the presentation where you can find more information and that application. The application's on a rolling basis. So if you are interested in these programs, you can apply now. The application asks for some evaluation results and different information that if you don't have currently available, don't worry about it, submit it so that the DOE in your child's transition process can help prepare and conduct any assessments that are outstanding to see if your child meets the eligibility for either of these programs. There's another program for children who have autism that's called AIMS. This one is a fairly newer program, and this is available in some, but not all of the District 75 schools, so the specialized schools for all children with IEPs. AIMS is a 6-student special class where children have really significant academic needs, potentially behavioral challenges, and it really targets also speech and language. So for children who are possibly nonverbal, there is a designated speech therapist who works alongside with the special education teacher and directly with the children. So it provides a very supportive environment. There is ACEs for children who are diagnosed with intellectual disability and also multiple disabilities. It is really designed to help improve a child's independence and their daily living skills. There is the iRead program, and for AIMS, ASD NEST, Horizon, ACEs, and iRead, there are applications. For iRead, it is a program that is developed for children who need support with early literacy, which sounds like it may include all children when we're talking about kindergarten. That's something that all children are working on. It is as well based on results of evaluations and offers targeted supports to help children be able to acquire those skills. TAP is a special type of integrated co-teaching class for children with and without disabilities, where the children with disabilities in the program, the children with IEPs, experience significant behavioral challenges that are impacting their learning. In addition to the general education teacher and the special education teacher, there's a designated social worker for the classroom, as well as a designated occupational therapist to support the children in the classroom who have IEPs. Generally, there are about 4 children with IEPs in the classroom and up to 16 children without IEPs. Then we've included barrier-free and accessible schools. This isn't a particular type of program, and you don't necessarily have to apply, but we do include it here just to flag that unfortunately not all schools are fully accessible schools. That meaning they can't all accommodate a child's vision, hearing, or physical movement. For example, accommodating a wheelchair. If your child needs an accessible school or needs a specific type of accommodation, recommend that you apply to accessible schools through the kindergarten application process. You can find information about accessibility on My Schools, which is the online directory. If you don't receive an offer to an accessible school through the kindergarten admissions process, it is also something to raise at the IEP meeting. The DOE is responsible for providing your child with a school that meets their accessibility needs. And just as a reminder, if you have questions on any of these programs, please put them in the Q&A and we will be pausing shortly to go over them, like now. Okay, so I'm just quickly looking to see if there are questions about the specialized classes. One question, can a child move from Horizon to NEST program eventually? Until what grade do these 2 programs go? How are they? They also follow general education programs in terms of academic. The admissions process for NEST and Horizon, although the programs are linked, they are done independently. Generally, a child who is eligible for NEST or a good fit for NEST is not a good fit for Horizon, and vice versa. So children don't transition from one to the other. Children are found eligible for either or. If a child changes, their needs change over time, maybe they become more, they would be a better fit from one program or the other. I believe you would have to go through the application process for that. You would have to be a decision that's made through specialized programs. It is not that they are interchangeable or children can transition from one to the other. These programs do go through high school, so children, particularly children who are accepted into the ASD NEST, generally will stay long-term in ASD NEST, and that's why we see that it's very challenging to get a seat in the ASD NEST program for older students, because families generally really like these programs. How can I find NEST Horizon schools in Queens to tour? Looks like some information is hidden. Is there some information on the DOE New York City page? So in part, yes, there is limited information about where these programs are located, because the DOE wants, well, families who are accepted into NEST and Horizon are then given the opportunity to view or to tour a proposed placement for their child to see if it would be a good fit. But I believe there is a concern that families, would try to apply to schools because they have a NEST and Horizon program. Applying to a school that has NEST and Horizon is not the same thing as applying to the NEST and Horizon program. So I just want to make sure that distinction is clear. I believe it's a program that's co-run by NYU, so there may be some more information on the NYU website. You can also go to the specialized program site to get more information, and you can contact the specialized program inbox, which is again on that DOE website we will link to, if you would like more information and to ask them specifically for schools in your area if you would like the opportunity to tour. But there is no directory of these programs that I know of that's publicly available. And just, it looks like an older question, what types of individual evaluations are available? If there are evaluations that cover hopefully all of a child's needs. If you feel like your child needs an assessment in an area where they haven't already been evaluated, for example, if they need speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy, you can request an evaluation in one of those areas. If your child needs a general evaluation of their cognitive ability, you can request an educational evaluation, a psychoeducational evaluation. We have a guide on AFC's website on different types of evaluations. I would recommend that you explore that guide. There are too many to go over. If a child has, for example, behavioral challenges, you can request a functional behavioral assessment that'll lead to a behavior intervention plan that's an evaluation and then document that really targets challenging behaviors, right? So identify what the behavioral challenges are, what's triggering those behaviors, how to reduce them. So there really are, there's no limitation on what kind of evaluations are available. You can request them from your DOE representative once that person is assigned to your case. And we have also more information about evaluations in our transition to kindergarten guide, which we will send you at the conclusion of this training. Okay, so I'm gonna let Diana keep answering some questions in the Q&A so that we can go forward with the rest of the presentation. Okay, so we went over the programs and different kind of school options. That really goes over the classroom setting where a child would be placed. In addition to the program, the IEP should go over the supports and services. The supports and services on this page are available across all different schools, across all different programs, meaning all different types of classrooms. And you should make sure that any of these services that your child needs is included in the IEP, particularly because you won't know which school your child will be attending necessarily next year at the time of your IEP meeting. So you want to make sure that anything that your child needs is written into the IEP. These are the most common supports and services. It's not an inclusive list, right? There are more options. But some of the most common, we see assistive technology, which is a device or piece of technology, some equipment that helps a child with their learning. Usually the most common ones are with communication. So maybe an augmented communication device, for example. Paraprofessionals, which can be for behavioral or medical needs. It can be a one-on-one paraprofessional explicitly to work with a child individually throughout the day, through part of the day, just for transportation, counseling and nursing services. For nursing, just want to point out that children with preschool nursing services, for example, a one-to-one nurse, will not automatically receive a one-to-one nurse in kindergarten because while not every preschool program has a nurse, the majority of schools, right, that children attend for kindergarten do have a nurse on staff. So it will really be, they'll have to determine if the child needs that individualized support throughout the day or if the school nurse will sufficiently meet the needs of the child. For families who may require nursing, do recommend that you start now getting medical accommodations forms and other paperwork from your child's doctor to make sure that recommendation is in place. Occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, very similar to the services also available for preschool. Special education teacher support services or SETS. This is similar to what a SEAT is in preschool. It is a special education teacher that can work push in or pull out with one child or with a group of students for part of the day to enhance their learning. A behavior intervention plan, as I just mentioned with respect to the functional behavioral assessment, is for children who are experiencing behavioral challenges. First, there's the FBA to determine what those behaviors are and what the triggers are, and so what's causing the behavior. The behavior intervention plan is a plan that's developed together with the parent and the school to create a plan for minimizing those behaviors, right? So if one of the triggers is, circle time because the child's worried about having to read aloud, then what supports can be put in place to prepare that child for circle time, right? Prompting, reminders, but also supports for potentially for reading if reading's one of their areas of concerns. And specialized transportation. Preschool students with disabilities who attend special classes or special classes in integrated settings automatically receive specialized transportation, so door to door. This is not the case for kindergarten. For kindergarten, specialized transportation is really dependent on the child's individual needs and whether the child can safely get to school through traditional means. Most kindergarten students get to school walking there with their parents, or may have a yellow school bus route depending on where their school is located. If these are not safe and appropriate options for your child may qualify for specialized transportation. That's something that should also be discussed at the IEP meeting. Okay. Again, if you have questions about those programs or those services, please put them in the Q&A. We'll be pausing again momentarily to go over that. But want to go over now all the communication that you'll receive from the DOE. This is something that we said is one of their main responsibilities throughout this year in preparing for your child's transition. So as I mentioned earlier, there was a yellow welcome packet that families should have received in the fall. This included, just a notification. We know your child's in preschool. We're preparing for their transition to kindergarten. Should have included information about the kindergarten application dates, a flyer with the DOE's kindergarten orientation meetings. So really just general information to help you know that the transition is in progress. If you did not receive that yellow packet, as a reminder, you should contact your CPSC administrator just to check the address that the DOE has on file for you. While you can find most of the information from that yellow packet online on the DOE's website, the rest of these notifications are going to be much more child specific, and you won't be able to find them anywhere. So you should really talk to your CPSC administrator, talk to your child's preschool, double check that contact information. Starting in January and then continuing throughout the school year, families will receive a notice of referral. If your child does not currently have a preschool IEP, the notice of referral will be on blue paper. For all the families of children who already have existing preschool IEPs, your notice of referral will come from your child's IEP team. So we'll most likely just be on standard white paper. The IEP teams can be teams based on in your local school. So in your child's zone school, it may be a team at another elementary school, or it can be a team at a committee on special education. So a CSC, which is similar to the CPSC that has created your child's preschool IEP. These letters, what's really important about them is it says who the DOE representative is on your child's case, meaning who will be overseeing your child's kindergarten transition process, conducting assessments, the person you asked to conduct any new assessments, and the person who will be in charge of scheduling your child's IEP meeting. If your child's case is reassigned to another DOE representative or another IEP team, you will receive a pink notice of case reassignment. Again, this is only if your case has been reassigned, so you don't necessarily have to look out for this letter. Once the IEP meeting is held, or within 10 days, you should receive the finalized IEP and also a prior written notice. A prior written notice summarizes the IEP recommendations. These two documents should match. It highlights the program and services recommended on the IEP and usually gives some type of rationale for why those were the programs and services recommended, and will say what type of documents were reviewed during the meeting. As I said, you should receive those within 10 days of the IEP meeting itself. Although if you attend the IEP meeting in person, you may be able to walk out with a copy of the IEP, or at the very least with the program recommendation page. Then families will receive a school location letter. This is a letter that if your child currently has a preschool IEP, you should receive it by or around June 15th. So it should be postmarked by June 15th. This letter is similar to the prior written notice in that it summarizes the program and services your child will receive next year, and also will list the school that will provide that program and service and those services. So for children who are recommended for a non-specialized school program, right? So if your child's recommended for general education with supports and services, for an integrated co-teaching, or for a 12 to 1-to-1 in a non-specialized school, the green school location letter should list the school that made your child an offer through the kindergarten application process. Because all the schools that you apply to through the kindergarten application process can offer all of those programs. If your child needs a specialized school, be that District 75 or a non-public school, then the school location letter or a bilingual special class or bilingual ICT, the green school location letter should list a program that has a school that has those programs. If your child if you applied to a specialized program like ASC Nest, Horizon, PATH, iRead, and your child is accepted, you will receive an additional purple specialized programs acceptance letter. And this is usually around that same time, May or later. For many families, they may still even hear throughout the summer because these programs have usually rolling admissions. And again, it's only families who are accepted into those specialized programs will receive the purple or lavender letter. Okay, so this is just to show you a little bit more the distinction between the prior written notice and the green school location letter. The document in white is the prior written notice. As you can see, it says the program recommended for the child, a 10-month program in a New York City non-specialized school, so a community school to zone school, specifically an integrated co-teaching class, but it does not list the school itself that will be providing that program and those services, whereas the green school location letter shows that the child is in a 10-month program in an ICT with their related services, and then explicitly says which school will be providing these services to the child, and in this case, it's PS 117. So if you haven't gotten mail, if you're worried about being able to get mail, here are some of our suggestions. Again, you should contact your CPSC administrator. This is the person who's been developing your child's preschool IEP. You can also contact the CPSC community coordinator for your area. This is a link to where you can find that, the contact information. Once your DOE representative reaches out in January, if you haven't received anything in the mail, and many of them will call you, you should explain to them, I haven't gotten anything in the mail yet. Definitely by January, you would have wanted to. So you would let them know, I haven't received anything in the mail. Can you double check my mailing address? At that point, you can also give them your email address if you would prefer to have things sent to you electronically. You would have to give consent to receive email. So that's something that you can do once your DOE representative reaches out. You can create a New York City Schools account or NYXA account to get some up-to-date information online. And again, talk to your DOE representative if you want to receive things electronically. Your CPSC administrator may also be able to support you in getting all of that permission in place. And your child's preschool is also always a resource, so don't hesitate to reach out to them. Families have the right to translation and interpretation. So talking about communication and IEP meetings, it's really important that things are in your language. Translation means written materials. The DOE should provide you copies of letters, forms, meeting notices in your language, and should provide interpretation, people there who speak your language at parent-teacher conferences, parent association meetings, suspension meetings, IEP meetings. You should discuss your language needs with your DOE representative. If the DOE is not providing translation and interpretation services for you, you can call this complaint line or email hello@schools.nyc.gov. While most things are available in the DOE in the top 10 or languages, Arabic, Bengali, Chinese, French, Haitian, Creole, Korean, Russian, Spanish, and Urdu, these are not the only languages for which there are translation and interpretation services. There are more than 200 languages that the DOE can access through their language line services and their translation services. So if you need these supports, let your CPSC team know, definitely your DOE representative, and again, contact the DOE if those services aren't being provided. Okay, we will pause now again for questions. Okay, so the options for a child that needs ABA are basically Horizon and District 75. So generally the DOE does not recommend any specific methodology, including ABA on a child's IEP. That said, there are some programs that do use ABA services or the ABA methodology. Horizon is one of them. The AIMS program is another. And some District 75 programs, you may have to, if your child is recommended for District 75, you can tour the school, ask them if they're providing ABA services. If your child needs ABA, it's something to raise at the IEP meeting. It is something that you can use to advocate for a specific type of program, but generally the DOE does not recommend ABA explicitly on a child's IEP. So that is something that you should know and keep in mind. Okay, so can a child with ABA be in a public school in an integrated classroom? Does the ABA service something we can ask for? Okay, so I think this is a very similar question about ABA. Again, ABA is not something that the DOE generally recommends explicitly on a child's IEP. I say that kind of generally because again, IEPs should be individualized based on a child's specific needs and not based on policies or generally what's available. If your child needs ABA services explicitly, then you should come to the IEP meeting with something, for example, from your developmental pediatrician or other providers working with your child that explains that. And you can advocate for that at your child's IEP meeting as you determine the program and services that your child needs. Okay, please keep putting questions in the Q&A, but for now we'll move on to other topics to wrap things up. So as I said, today's presentation really focused on developing the kindergarten IEP, but another key component about where your child will receive those programs and services, especially if the DOE recommends a non-specialized school, is the kindergarten admissions process. The kindergarten admissions process is opening in about a month, in about a week on December 5th, and will be open through January 19th, 2024. There are 3 ways to apply. You can apply online at My Schools. You can call the Office of Enrollment at 718-935-2009, or you can contact a Family Welcome Center so you can have an appointment to complete the evaluation on paper in person. Just like the translation and interpretation services, you can apply in your preferred language. My Schools, the online directory and application portal is available in 10 languages, and through the phone or a Family Welcome Center, you can apply in over 200 languages. As you can see, the application deadline is coming up quickly, so do encourage that you start reviewing your options, looking at schools in your area, and do encourage all families, including families of children with disabilities, to apply through this process. Most children do attend a non-specialized school for kindergarten, and this is your opportunity to express your preference in which school that'll be. Okay, and we'll do another poll. You should apply to schools after the DOE holds your child's kindergarten IEP meeting. Is this true or false? And let me just pull this up. Okay, everyone who's answered is correct. The answer is false. You should not wait until the DOE holds your child's IEP meeting in order to apply to schools. The application deadline ends on January 19th, 2024. Most IEP meetings take place between February and May. So if you wait until your child's IEP meeting, it is too late to apply to DOE schools. It's too late to express your preference in one of the non-specialized schools. Your child will still be going to kindergarten, will still get a seat. But if your child's IEP recommends a non-specialized school, you won't have the opportunity to express your preference. At that point, you would just be able to put yourself on the wait list for different schools, or most likely your child would attend their zone school. We know that this can be kind of challenging to think about, like, how do I apply to schools without knowing what my child's IEP will recommend? Again, the reason the DOE says they do this or it's timed this way is because all the DOE non-specialized schools, all the District 1 through 32 schools offer the same programs and special education support as any other non-specialized schools. And so they don't take account, a child's IEP is not taken into account for better or worse in determining those placements. Once your child's IEP is developed, those schools, if your child's IEP recommends a non-specialized schools, will have to implement your child's IEP. So just a reminder about the IEP and placement. When these two processes come together, it's in the school location letter. This is the letter that both summarizes what your child's IEP recommends and says the school that will be providing the program and services for your child in kindergarten. We recommend that you contact the school listed on the school location letter to make sure that they have the program and services that your child needs. This is especially true for children whose IEP recommend a 12 to 1-to-1 in a non-specialized school. While the DOE says that all non-specialized schools have a 12 to 1-to-1 or have a special class, we know that in practice, that's not always the case. So we do recommend that you call a school, try to get confirmation. Do you have a special class? Will you have a special class in September? It's very possible that even if they don't have a special class this year, they may be opening up a special class next year because the students who received offers to that school will have that same recommendation. But if the school will not be able to implement your child's IEP, you may have the right, to discuss accommodations, have the right to request another school placement, and in some cases may then have a right to a non-approved or private placement for a year based on any kind of violations or failure of the DOE to provide the program and services your child needs. Okay, so if you run into any challenges throughout this process, these are some of the initial steps you can take to try to resolve those issues. The first and foremost, your DOE representative, the person in charge of conducting assessments, leading your child's IEP meeting. This is going to be your main point of contact throughout this year. So once that person's assigned to you around January or February, when they reached out, will be your go-to person. So first and foremost, try to resolve any issues with them, requesting assessments, challenging, making questions about why they aren't conducting assessments if you need them. If the IEP's meeting scheduled at a date that's not convenient for you, this is the person you go to for all of those issues. If you run into challenges with the IEP process, you can contact the DOE Special Education Office. There's an inbox that's specifically for these issues. It's called turning5@schools.nyc.gov. You can feel free to copy us at Advocates for Children at our kindergarten inbox, or you can call the Special Education Office's hotline, 718-935-2007. If you're having issues with the application process or the school that made your child an offer, you can contact the DOE Office of Student Enrollment. They have an inbox, ES Enrollment, so elementary school enrollment at schools.nyc.gov, or their telephone number 718-935-2009. If these steps don't help you resolve the issue, families of children with disabilities also have the right to request mediation, file an impartial hearing, or file a formal complaint. These are more formal ways of trying to resolve an issue. Specifically, when it comes to an impartial hearing, we do recommend that you reach out and try to consult with an attorney, because it is a process that's very much like a trial, where parties may be bringing in witnesses and asking questions and needing to submit a lot of different type of paperwork. We have more information about all of these in our Transition to Kindergarten guide that, as I said, we will send you after the presentation. So some additional resources for special education. This is a link to our Transition to Kindergarten guide that is on our website. The DOE also has resources, including a website on moving to kindergarten, so everything having to do with the transition. They have a kindergarten orientation guide. This is a photo of the cover. You can learn more about District 75 programs on their website. And this is the link to the specialized program. So this is where you can find the application for ASD Nest, Horizon, AIMS, iRead, ACES as well, and PAP. So this is where, and it also has information on bilingual ICT and special classes. Again, you do not apply to those programs though. The DOE is hosting meetings similar to this one. This is one of the mailings that should have been, or one of the materials that should have been in your orientation or welcome packet in the fall. As you can see, there's a session upcoming on December 5th. You can also watch some of their pre-recorded sessions online. The slides that we send you, these links will be active, so you can easily access this information. For applying to kindergarten, AFC has a kindergarten admissions guide. This goes over all the application deadlines, the 3 ways to apply, how offers are made, so you understand your chances of getting an offer to any particular school, kind of understanding sibling priorities, understanding special circumstances for students with disabilities, students in temporary housing, students in foster care, more information on busing and all of those things. The DOE also has resources. My Schools at NYC is the online directory and also where you can apply to schools. School search to help you identify different schools in your area. There's a kindergarten website, and there's this public school admissions guide that goes over admissions from 3K all the way through high school. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our presentation. As I said, I hope that you've learned a lot. We will also be sharing with you all of this information. We will be sharing the slides. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar. We will be sharing kind of all these things that I've linked to with you as well. Before we go, please complete our survey. Let us know what you learned or how this presentation went. Jan and I will stay on while people complete the survey as well to answer any questions. I'm going to quickly check the Q&A to see if there are any new questions there. If you need help also later on in the process, even reviewing all of these materials, please contact us. We have a helpline that's available Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's toll free, so you can contact us at 866-427-6033 or by email at info@advocatesforchildren.org. And then with that, we'll just quickly check the Q&A. Please complete the poll. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so we have a question that I think, again, we get kind of regularly is basically I need to apply to general education schools near us, even if my daughter needs a small special education classroom. You're not required to apply to schools through the kindergarten admissions process, but we recommend that you do because it is your chance to express your preference in the school your child will attend. Because a majority of children are recommended for programs that are in non-specialized schools, this is your chance to apply and say, well, you know, if my child's going to a non-specialized school, I would rather it be one of these two instead of the one that's, you know, 10 blocks away. That said, you know, you can apply to up to 12 schools. If you choose to just apply to 1 or 2, that's perfectly fine. If your child's IEP meeting, it's determined that your child needs a more specialized placement, if they need a District 75 placement, an NPS, or a bilingual ICT or special class, you do not have to accept the school that made your child a kindergarten offer. The DOE will send you a school through the school location letter, right? On that green paper, we'll send you a school that can implement your child's IEP. So we'll send you a District 75 school, we'll send you a school that has a bilingual special class or bilingual ICT, and your child will not attend the school that made you a kindergarten admissions offer. The admissions process is just your chance to express your preference. If you know that your child, you know, if your child is currently in a, you know, for example, a 6 to 1-to-1 special class, if your child is nonverbal, if your child has significant behaviors, and it's really not likely that your child will be able to attend a special class in a non-specialized setting. If you don't want to go through that process, again, nobody has to, or you can apply to just one school. But if you don't want to go to that process, you don't need to. But since most children are recommended for non-specialized schools, we do encourage families of children with disabilities to apply. And because the dates don't match up, we, you know, you have to apply before your child's kindergarten IEP meeting. So I hope that answers your question. I know that the two processes kind of don't overline in the best way, but this is just to show you how they all come together. Okay, so I'm not seeing other questions in the Q&A. Oh, sorry. So I'm seeing a question: if you select a regular school, will they definitely send you a District 75 school as well? If a Turning 5 meeting says so, will it disqualify you from District 1 through 32? Okay, so if you apply to school through the kindergarten admissions process, you will receive an offer in the spring. By that time, you may or may not have had your child's kindergarten IEP meeting. If your child's kindergarten IEP meeting recommends a District 75 program, then the DOE is required to offer you a District 75 program, or a school, with a District 75 program. If you, and so you can turn down the school that made you a kindergarten admissions offer and send your child to the District 75 school. If you disagree with the District 75 recommendation, and are not sending your child, and notify the DOE that you are not sending your child to a District 75 school, period, right? Not like I need another District 75 school. If you're saying I turned down this IEP, I'm ending my child's special education services, then you're not disqualified from a non-specialized school. You can send your child to a non-specialized school, including the school that made your child an offer, or to their zone school. Again, that would be a drastic step to terminate, or potentially drastic step to terminate your child's special education services. But it is an option for you. So I hope that answers your question. But just separately, if your child is recommended for District 75, then yes, the DOE has to send you a school that can implement your child's IEP. There is no application process for District 75 schools. The DOE has to offer your child a placement. We have a question about whether NPSs come up in IEP meetings. Yes, NPSs were one of the schools listed in one of the slides that Diana covered. These are state-approved non-public schools. So they are private schools, but they are schools because they're approved by the state to offer special education services that can be recommended on a child's IEP. All of the programs and services that we discussed today are programs and services that can be recommended on a child's IEP. We did not go through, for example, private placements or those type of cases for this particular reason. So if your child's needs can't be served in a DOE public school, be that non-specialized schools or District 75, if you have any evaluations showing that or reflecting that, recommend that you bring those with you to the IEP meeting and advocate at the meeting for a non-public school placement. It is something that can be recommended on a child's IEP. So I'm seeing a lot of questions from one particular person, Rainbow, on your individual child's needs and how to advocate. Do recommend that you may want to follow up with us on our helpline, just because this is a public forum. Want to allow space for that and can't get into specifics of an individual child. But just if in terms of what documentation you would need or what type of programs are available or where to ask, hopefully we've provided you with a good base for that. You can follow up with our helpline or with our inbox here to get more information specific to your child. The materials we'll be sending you, including our transition guide, give much more information on non-public school placements and different types of evaluation options, or different types of assessments and evaluations, and how to get those through the IEP team. Okay, well, thank you again for all of you who came and participated. We'll stay on for a little bit more just to see if there's anything new in the Q&A. Please continue to respond to our poll, and good luck with its process. I know that it can be overwhelming, but hopefully you you're well on your way to preparing your child for kindergarten, and hope it can go as smoothly as possible.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Looks like everyone who's still here has completed the poll, so thank you so much. We'll be ending the webinar, and have a good day.
Everyone.